The lobby of Cayenne Tower fell silent. Not gradually, not slowly. All at once, like someone had pressed pause on the entire world. One moment, the marble floors of Seoul's most prestigious corporate building were filled with the usual sounds of power. The sharp click of designer heels, the hushed tones of billion-dollar negotiations, the distant hum of elevators carrying important people to important meetings. And then she appeared. A little girl no more than 5 years old burst through the revolving glass doors like a storm trapped inside a tiny body. Her shoes were wrong. One was a pink sneaker. The other was a blue rubber sandal. Her white dress was torn at the shoulder, streaked with dirt along the hem. Her dark hair was wild, tangled, half pulled from a lopsided ponytail that someone had tried and failed to make neat. She was trembling. Her small hands were balled into fists at her sides, and her chest was heaving with the effort of crying and running at the same time. Two things that, when done together, make a child look absolutely broken. "Appa," she screamed. The word cut through the silence like a blade. It was the Korean word for father. Everyone froze. The receptionist behind the curved marble desk stood up slowly, her polished composure cracking at the edges. Two security guards in crisp black uniforms exchanged a sharp look. A group of businessmen in tailored suits paused mid-conversation, briefcases dangling from loosened fingers. The little girl spun in a circle, her red-rimmed eyes sweeping the lobby desperately. She was looking for someone who clearly was not there. Her bottom lip trembled so hard it looked painful. Then she ran again. Not toward the exit. Toward the elevator. Toward the only elevator in the entire building that was flanked by 2 additional guards and marked, in both Korean and English, private. Executive access only. "Hey, wait." One guard lunged forward. The little girl ducked under his arm with the desperate agility of a child who had nothing left to lose. She slammed both tiny palms against the elevator doors as they slid open, stumbled inside, and looked up with wide, terrified eyes. She had pressed the highest button she could reach. Floor 72. The executive floor. The floor that belonged to one man. Do Kayonwoo. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you never miss another powerful, emotional story like this one. Part 2. The man on THE 72 ND floor. There were exactly 3 types of people in Seoul who were never interrupted. The President of the Republic, the Chairman of the National Assembly, and Do Kayonwoo. At 41, Do Kayonwoo was the kind of man that other powerful men crossed the street to avoid offending. Not because he was violent, not because he was cruel, exactly, but because he was something that many people found far more unsettling than cruelty. He was completely, utterly unmovable. He had built Cayenne Global from a single failing logistics company into a multi-industry empire worth $47 billion. He had done it in 12 years. He had done it without a single public scandal, without a single visible weakness, and most unnerving of all, without ever raising his voice. Do Kayonwoo didn't need to raise his voice. When he entered a boardroom, men who had spent their entire careers cultivating confidence suddenly found it difficult to hold eye contact. When he made a decision, it was made. There was no debate, no second-guessing. The decision existed, and the world arranged itself around it. His staff called him the glacier behind closed doors. Not because he was slow. Glaciers are not slow. Glaciers are enormous, silent, and they reshape everything they touch without a single moment of hesitation. That was Do Kayonwoo. On this particular Tuesday morning, he was standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 72nd floor office, hands clasped behind his back, looking down at the Han River far below. His suit was charcoal gray. His posture was flawless. His expression was the same expression it always was, composed, unreadable, utterly still. His assistant, Ms. Park, a sharp, efficient woman who had worked for him for 6 years and had never once seen him flinch, was reading from a tablet behind him. "The Inchin deal is confirmed for Thursday. The Hong Kong delegation will arrive at 1400 hours, and you're 2 o'clock with Minister. The elevator doors opened. Ms. Park stopped speaking. Du Kaiyan-woo did not turn around. The sound that entered his office was something none of his staff had ever heard in this space before. Crying. Small, hiccuping, desperate, exhausted crying. The kind that comes
What
from
is
a
the meaning
child
of
who has been
this?
holding it together for too long and has finally run out of strength to keep going. He turned around slowly. There, standing between his elevator doors, clutching the frame on both sides so that she wouldn't be pulled back in, was the smallest human being he had ever seen in this office. She was shaking from head to toe. Her face was flushed and blotchy, her eyes so swollen from crying that they were nearly half closed. A fresh stream of tears was cutting through what looked like older, dried ones on her round cheeks. She had a small, worn backpack on her back, the kind with a cartoon bear on it, and it was zipped open slightly, as if she had reached into it many times during whatever journey had brought her here. She stared at him. He stared at her. Behind her, the security guard who had finally caught the elevator appeared, breathing hard, reaching for her shoulder. Du Kaiyan-woo raised one hand. The guard stopped immediately. Silence. The little girl looked up at Du Kaiyan-woo with an expression that was impossible to describe, somewhere between terror and overwhelming, desperate relief. As if she had been running toward something for a very long time, and she was no longer sure she had found the right thing, but she was too exhausted to run anymore. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. You have the same sad eyes, she said. My mama said to find the man with the sad eyes in the tall building. The room went absolutely still. Ms. Park looked at her boss. His face had not changed, but something behind his eyes had moved, something deep and buried and very old. He stared at the trembling little girl. And for the first time in 6 years, Ms. Park watched Du Kaiyan-woo not immediately know what to do. He had told himself many things over 11 years. Her name, they would learn, was Zara Bennett. 5 years old, half Korean, half British, born in London, according to the small, laminated card tucked inside her cartoon bear backpack, the kind of card a careful mother makes for a child before sending them somewhere uncertain. The card read, Her name is Zara, she is 5. She is kind and she is brave, even when she doesn't feel it. Please take care of her. I am sorry I cannot explain more. She will know what to say. Mia. Du Kaiyan-woo read the card once. He read it again. Then he set it down on the table in front of him with the careful deliberateness of a man handling something he suspects might be explosive. Zara sat across from him in one of the enormous leather chairs in his private meeting room, her feet dangling several inches above the floor. Miss Park had brought her a warm glass of barley tea and a small plate of honey rice crackers, which Zara had looked at for a long moment before taking one with both hands, very carefully, like she was afraid it might be taken away. She had stopped crying, but she still trembled slightly. The way a candle flame trembles in a room where there is no wind, just the trembling of the thing itself, trying to stay lit. Du Kaiyan-woo sat across from her. He had not asked his staff to leave. He had not called security. He had not, as he did with every other unexpected intrusion into his day, immediately resolved the situation and moved on. He just sat. Zara, he said. His voice was low and measured. He was not trying to sound warm. He did not know how to try to sound warm. Where is your mother? Zara looked at the rice cracker in her hands. She went to the hospital, she said. 3 days ago, she said she'd come back. She said if she didn't come back by morning, I should go find the man with the sad eyes. She said it very matter-of-factly. The way children report devastating things, without the full understanding of the weight they're carrying, but with an instinctive sense that the weight is real. Your mother told you to come here, to this building. Zara nodded. She showed me a picture on her phone. She said his name a long time ago, but I forgot. A pause. She said he would know our song. Ms. Park, standing near the door, glanced at her boss. Du Kaiyan-woo had gone very still. What song? He asked. His voice was the same, even, controlled, low, but something in his throat had tightened. Zara reached into her half-open backpack and pulled out something that made the air in the room change. It was a music box. Small, oval, lacquered in deep blue with tiny gold cranes painted across the lid. The hinges were worn. The gold had faded in the places that had been touched the most. It was clearly very old. It was clearly very loved. Du Kaiunwoo looked at that music box and did not breathe. "My mama plays it every night," Zara said, turning it over in her small hands. "She says it's from someone who loved her a long time ago. She says when she's sad, she plays it and it makes her feel like he's still there." She looked up at Du Kaiunwoo. "Do you know the song?" The room was absolutely silent. And then, before anyone could stop him, Du Kaiunwoo reached across the table with one hand and lifted the lid of the music box himself. The melody that rose from it was small and clear and heartbreakingly delicate. A simple tune, 12 notes, repeating. The kind of melody that sounds like it was written for a music box from the beginning, as if it could not exist in any other form. And something happened to Du Kaiunwoo's face. It didn't collapse. It didn't crumble. It was not dramatic in the way that collapses are dramatic. It was subtler and more devastating than that. His eyes closed. Just for a moment, 3, maybe 4 seconds, his jaw tightened. A single muscle in his neck moved. And when he opened his eyes again, they were, and Ms. Park would spend years trying to find the right word for this, wet. Not crying. Just wet. Like a window after rain. Part 4, the past that never leaves. There are things we bury so deep inside ourselves that we begin to believe they are gone. We build walls above them. We fill the walls with ambition and work and power and control. We become people who do not need those things, those soft, dangerous, breakable things, because we have made ourselves into something that does not break. Du Kaiunwoo had been doing this for 11 years. 11 years ago, he had been 29. Not yet a billionaire. Not yet a glacier. He had been a man who laughed too loudly at bad jokes and stayed up until 2 in the morning reading novels and fell completely, catastrophically in love with a British-Korean graduate student named Mia Bennett, who had walked into his cousin's art gallery opening and stood in front of a terrible painting for 20 full minutes, completely absorbed. He had asked her what she saw in it. She had said everything the painter was afraid to say out loud. He had never recovered from that sentence. They had 6 months. 6 months of reckless, wonderful, terrifying love, the kind that makes you feel simultaneously invincible and completely exposed. He had played her that music box on their 3rd date. It had belonged to his grandmother. He had never shown it to anyone. He gave it to her on the last night they spent together. Because there was a last night. Because his father had gotten sick. Because the company had been collapsing. Because Kaiunwoo had made a choice. The first of many cold, logical, devastating choices he would make over the next decade, and chosen responsibility over love. He had ended it. He had told her it was necessary, that he had no room in the life ahead of him for something so fragile, that she would be better without someone like what he was becoming. She had looked at him for a long moment. She had not cried. She had picked up her coat. And she had left the music box on his table. He had mailed it back to her 3 days later. He had told himself it was closure. Du Kaiunwoo stood at the window of his private meeting room and called his head of research. "Find me everything about a woman named Mia Bennett, currently in Seoul, British national, approximately mid-30s, started with hospitals, check every hospital in the city." He hung up before the answer came. Zara had fallen asleep in the large leather chair. She had done it suddenly, the way small children do. One moment she had been carefully eating her 3rd rice cracker and watching Du Kaiunwoo with her large, serious eyes, and the next her head had drooped sideways and she was deeply, utterly asleep. The cracker was still in her hand. Ms. Park moved to take it gently. Du Kaiunwoo stopped her. He took the cracker himself, carefully, without waking the child. Ms. Park stared at him. He did not acknowledge her staring. He went back to the window and stood there, holding a half-eaten honey rice cracker, looking out at the city he owned, thinking about 11 years of deliberate forgetting. Outside the meeting room, word had spread through the office the way things always spread in powerful places, quietly, swiftly, with the electric charge of something unprecedented. Du Kaiyan-woo's executive floor operated on a strict culture of professionalism. No gossip, no personal conversations, no unnecessary noise. But this was something none of them had ever seen. There was a child sleeping in the boss's meeting room. And their boss, the man who had once sent a department head home for bringing his lunch to a meeting, was standing in that room, silent, looking out the window with an expression that no one in the office had a name for. This was not the emotional story anyone had expected from Du Kaiyan-woo. This was the kind of touching story that happened to other people. Not to him. The call came back in 40 minutes. Mia Bennett, 34, British national, residing in Mapogu, Seoul, for the past 3 years, employed as a translator and English tutor, admitted to Yonsei University Hospital 3 days ago. Diagnosis, not information that research could easily obtain. Du Kaiyan-woo was in his car in 7 minutes. He left Zara sleeping in the care of Ms. Park, who had looked at him with wide eyes when he said, "Stay with her. Do not leave her alone for even 5 minutes." "Sir, her mother is in Yonsei Hospital. I am going." Ms. Park had looked at him for a long moment. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. In the car, he sat very still in the back seat and watched Seoul move past the windows and did not think about what he was feeling, because the shape of what he was feeling was too large and too complicated to think about in a moving car. He thought instead about a girl who had walked into a gallery 11 years ago and looked at a terrible painting for 20 minutes. He thought about 12 notes. He thought about a music box, mailed back, that had somehow ended up in the hands of a 5-year-old with mismatched shoes. It was quiet, pale green walls, the kind of institutional lighting that makes everyone look a little bit worse than they are, machines that beeped softly, recording the rhythms of a life that was present but struggling. The woman in the bed was smaller than he remembered. Or perhaps he had just made her larger in memory, the way we make the people we've lost into something slightly larger than life. Her hair was shorter. There were soft shadows under her eyes, but the shape of her face was exactly as he remembered it, the same slightly sharp jaw, the same small nose, the same mouth that had always looked like it was holding something unsaid. Her eyes were closed. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he walked in and sat down in the chair beside her bed. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He just sat. After a while, a nurse came in and explained, gently, carefully, using the kind of measured language that medical professionals use when delivering information that is large, that Ms. Bennett had been found unconscious in her apartment, that she had been managing a diagnosis for some time, that the next several days would be critical, that she had, upon waking briefly that first night, been very upset. She had asked about a child. She had said the child was alone. Du Kaiyan-woo listened to all of this without expression. "Is there family?" the nurse asked. "No," he said, then after a pause, "She has me." The nurse looked at him. She clearly recognized him. There was a flicker of something, shock, confusion, and then the professionalism reasserted itself. "I'll let the attending physician know," she said. When she left, Du Kaiyan-woo turned back to the bed. Mia's eyes were open. She was looking at him. Neither of them spoke for a very long time. The machines beeped. The institutional lights hummed. Somewhere down the corridor, someone laughed briefly and then stopped. "She found you," Mia said finally. Her voice was rougher than he remembered, but the cadence was exactly the same. "She found me," he said. A pause. "I didn't have anywhere else to send her." Her eyes moved to the window. "I know that wasn't fair." "It doesn't matter." "It does matter." She turned back to him, and her eyes, even exhausted, even weighted with everything she was carrying, were still the clearest thing he had ever seen. It matters because I made a choice a long time ago not to ask you for anything. I kept that, and then her voice caught. She stopped, steadied. I almost left her with no one. Du Kaiyan-woo looked at the woman in the hospital bed and felt 11 years of carefully constructed distance, doing what all constructed things eventually do. Developing cracks. Tell me about her, he said. And for the first time in a very long time, Mia Bennett allowed herself to. This was the part that would break him. He learned it in pieces. He learned that after he had ended things, after the careful, logical, devastating choice, Mia had stayed in Seoul for several more months. She had been teaching. She had been trying to be fine because she was the kind of woman who tried very hard to be fine. She had found out she was pregnant 4 months after their last night together. She had made her own choice then. Not out of anger, not out of spite. She had made it out of love, the complicated, fierce, slightly irrational love of a woman who had seen what a man was becoming and decided that she would not add guilt to his architecture. She had gone home to London. She had had the baby. She had named her Zara because she had always loved that name, and because the middle name, the name no one used, was a Korean name. Hyun, which meant bright. Zara Hyun Bennett. She had raised her alone. She had moved back to Seoul 3 years ago because she had always loved this city, and because she admitted this quietly, looking at the window. She had told herself it was for the city, but she had known, somewhere beneath the logic, that she was moving back to the same city as him, not to find him, not to demand anything, just to be in the same skyline. She had been managing a heart condition for 2 years. It had gotten worse recently, much worse. The episode 3 days ago had come with no warning. She had been making Zara's lunch, and then she had been on the kitchen floor, and then she had been here. She had woken long enough, on that first night, to do one thing. She had written the note and put it in Zara's backpack. She had told a neighbor to take Zara to school as usual, and then that evening, because she knew Zara, knew the particular stubbornness and resourcefulness of her daughter, she had told Zara, "If I'm not home by morning, find the man with the sad eyes in the tall building on the river. Take the music box. He will know." She had shown Zara a photo on her phone. She had trusted a 5-year-old with the most important instruction of her life. And Zara, brave, trembling, mismatched shoe, rice cracker Zara, had done exactly what her mother asked. Du Kaiyan-woo sat with all of this. He sat with it the way you sit with an earthquake, not because you have chosen to, but because the ground has moved and you are in it. When Mia finished speaking, the room was very quiet. Then he said, and his voice was not entirely even for the first time in 11 years. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mia looked at him with an expression that was not accusation and was not bitterness. It was something softer and more devastating than both. "Because I had watched you choose," she said gently, "and I respected your choice. I didn't want you to spend your life with us out of obligation." A small pause. She deserved better than obligation. Du Kaiyan-woo looked at his hands. They were, he noticed distantly, trembling slightly. Him. Trembling. The glacier. "I need to call Ms. Park," he said. Mia blinked. "Why?" "Because your daughter is asleep in my office eating rice crackers, and I need to tell someone to bring her here."
It's mine! Give it back!
So she can see
No,
that
you
you're
can't
all
have
right.
it.
Something happened to
All
Mia's
right,
face.
take it.
It was not a small thing. It was the kind of thing that makes people in hospital rooms reach for the tissue box on the bedside table. And Mia Bennett reached for hers. And Du Kaiyan-woo watched her cry for the first time in his life and felt something inside his chest that he had no adequate language for. He picked up his phone. He called Ms. Park. His voice, when he spoke to her, was still composed, still measured, still on the surface, the voice of the glacier. But Ms. Park had worked for him for 6 years. And she heard, underneath it, something she had never heard before. She didn't say anything about it. She just said, "I'll bring her immediately, sir." They heard her before they saw her. The sound of small, urgent footsteps in the hospital corridor. The half-running, half-skipping gait of a child who has been told, "Don't run in the hospital," and is compromising by moving as fast as she possibly can without technically running. And then, Mama. Not a scream this time. A sound completely different from the desperate cry that had torn through Kayun Tower's lobby that morning. This was quieter. This was a word breathed out like a prayer that has finally been answered. Zara came through the door and crossed the room and climbed up onto the hospital bed with the absolute, fearless certainty of a child who has only one thing in the world that matters and has just found it. Mia caught her, held her. The machines beeped softly. Du Kayun-woo stood near the window, his back half-turned, looking at the city lights beginning to come on as the afternoon faded. He was not looking at the bed. He was giving them the privacy of the moment. But he heard it. He heard Mia's voice, low and fierce and breaking. "You did so well, baby. You did so well." He heard Zara's voice, muffled against her mother's shoulder. "I found the sad eyes man, Mama, like you said." A pause. "I know, baby. I know you did. He gave me rice crackers." A sound half-laugh, half-sob from Mia. "Did he? And he let me sleep in a really big chair." Du Kayun-woo closed his eyes. Behind him, without turning around, he was aware that Ms. Park, who had accompanied Zara, who was standing near the door, who had worked for this man for 6 years through every cold and controlled and unreadable moment he had produced, was crying quietly. He was aware that the nurse who had come back to check the machines was very still and was looking at him with an expression he could feel without seeing. He was aware that the room was full of a feeling that had no corporate term and no strategic value, and could not be managed or directed or decided upon. He stayed at the window for a long moment. Then he turned around. Zara was curled against her mother's side, her cartoon bear backpack still on her back because no one had thought to take it off. She was looking at Du Kayun-woo from the shelter of her mother's arm with those large, serious, tired eyes. "Are you going to go away now?" she asked. The simplest question in the world. Du Kayun-woo looked at the 5-year-old girl with her mismatched shoes and her worn music box and her extraordinary, ferocious bravery. He looked at Mia, who was watching him with an expression that asked nothing and braced for everything. He crossed the room. He pulled the chair close to the bed and sat down. "No," he said, "I'm not going anywhere." The room held its breath. Zara studied him for a long moment with the rigorous, unsentimental scrutiny that only small children apply to important things. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out the music box. She held it out to him. "Can you play it?" she asked. "Mama says it sounds better when it's sad and happy at the same time." Du Kayun-woo took the music box. He lifted the lid. The 12 notes rose into the hospital room, small and clear and steady, the same melody that had filled his office, and his memory, and the 11 years of deliberate silence he had built around it. Zara listened with her eyes half-closed, pressed against her mother's side. Mia listened with her eyes fully closed, and her hand pressed over her own heart. Ms. Park, at the door, stopped trying to hold herself together. The nurse left the room quickly, for professional reasons that had nothing to do with the fact that she was crying. And Du Kayun-woo, the glacier, the unreadable, the feared, the man who had spent 11 years making himself into something that did not tremble, sat in a hospital chair and played a music box for the daughter he had not known he had, while the only woman he had ever truly loved breathed beside them both, and let the melody fill in every crack. This was the heart-touching story that no one in Kayun Tower would ever quite agree on how to tell afterward. This was the powerful story that Ms. Park would carry for the rest of her career. The day the music box came back and took something cold apart, note by note. This was the emotional story of a 5-year-old girl who ran through a glass door and broke a glacier with both hands. The next weeks were not simple. Nothing about this was simple, and to tell it as though it became simple quickly would be to disrespect the weight of what had to be carried. Mia's condition was serious. The doctors were careful with their words. The treatment would be long. The outcome was uncertain in the particular, terrible way that medical outcomes are uncertain, not hopeless, but not guaranteed, the kind of space where you learn that hope is a practice, not a feeling. Du Kaiyan-woo arranged for the best cardiac team in Seoul. He did this not because he was a billionaire, and this was the thing a billionaire would do, though it was, but because it was the only concrete, manageable thing available to him, and he was a man who had always reached for the concrete and manageable when everything else was too large to hold. He arranged for Zara to be cared for during the days Mia was too tired for visitors. He did this with the same careful, systematic approach he applied to all problems, identifying the need, sourcing the solution, implementing it cleanly. The difference was that this time, the problem was not a market condition or a contract negotiation. The problem was a 5-year-old girl who needed someone to take her to the hospital every afternoon and help her choose which drawing to show her mother. Zara chose him. With the same inexplicable certainty with which she had chosen the 72nd floor, the same directness with which she had held out the music box, she simply annexed Du Kaiyan-woo into her life. She took his hand in hospital corridors without asking. She narrated everything she saw. She had opinions about which elevator was better and communicated those opinions at length. She called him Ajasi, the Korean word for an older man, a respectful but warm uncleish title, and she said it with such easy familiarity that he stopped being surprised by it sometime around the 4th day. His staff noticed the change. Not all at once, in fragments. The way he would glance at his phone more frequently. The way a small crayon drawing, blue, with 2 figures and something that was either a building or a very large sandwich, appeared at the corner of his otherwise perfectly clear desk. The way he sometimes arrived slightly later in the morning, and the way Ms. Park noticed that on those mornings, there were often small smudges on the sleeve of his suit that looked like they might be from the hands of someone who had recently been coloring. The office did not comment. But the office felt different. There is a kind of warmth that comes into a building when the person at its top begins to thaw. It moves through the floors quietly, the way heat moves, imperceptible at first, then undeniable. People smiled more in the break room. Meetings ran a few minutes longer because the conversation breathed more easily. A junior analyst who had been terrified to submit a report correction found that the correction was received without the cold precision she had been dreading. Something had shifted. Something small and enormous. 3 weeks after Zara had run through the revolving glass doors of Kaiyan Tower, Du Kaiyan-woo sat with Mia in the hospital garden on one of her better evenings, when she was strong enough to sit outside and the city air was almost sweet. He had brought her tea from the place she had once mentioned 11 years ago was her favorite. He didn't say how he remembered. She didn't ask. They sat for a while in the way that people sit who have so much to say that the words have to organize themselves carefully before anyone begins. Then Mia said, "I never blamed you, Kaiyan-woo. I want you to know that." He held his tea. "You had more right to than most people." "Maybe," she looked at the garden, "but blame requires anger, and I was never really angry. I was," she paused, searching, "sad, and then okay, and then a mother, in that order." A small pause. Being her mother made me everything I wasn't before. He was quiet for a moment. "She is extraordinary," he said, and the word came out differently than he intended, not as an evaluation, which was how he usually processed information about people, but as something raw and unguarded, an admission. "I don't know how you did it, alone." "You do it because you have to," Mia said simply, "and then you discover you didn't do it alone at all. You did it with her." She smiled, the first full, unguarded smile he had seen from her since the hospital. "She's been taking care of me for longer than she knows." He thought about Zara choosing his elevator, Zara holding out the music box, Zara asking, with the uncomplicated bravery of someone who has not yet learned to be afraid of the answer, "Are you going to go away now?" "No," he said again, not aloud this time, but to himself, and answer the question that had been underneath everything since that day in the lobby. "Then I would like to be there if you'll allow it." He looked at Mia directly. "For both of you, Not because I feel I owe a debt, though I understand if you receive it that way, but because, he stopped, searched for a language he had spent 11 years not practicing. Because I made a choice that I told myself was necessary, and I have carried it as though it was simple, and it was not simple. And I would like a pause. I would like not to make that choice again. The garden was very quiet. Mia looked at him for a long moment. She already loves you, she said softly. She doesn't know why, but she does. Children know things. I know, he said. He thought of the crayon drawing on the corner of his desk. I know they do. Another long pause. One day at a time, Mia said. That's all I can offer, one day at a time. That's enough, he said. That's everything. On the day Mia was cleared to leave the hospital, 6 weeks after a trembling little girl in mismatched shoes had run through a revolving glass door and changed the gravitational pull of a life, Du Kaiyan-woo arrived with Zara. Zara was wearing matching shoes today, red ones. She had apparently made this decision herself and communicated it to Du Kaiyan-woo with great seriousness the night before, explaining that this was a special day and special days required matching shoes. He had agreed. He had also, quietly, arranged for the car that would take Mia home to stop at her favorite garden on the Han River, the one she had described to him 11 years ago when she was new to Seoul and everything was still surprising. He had said nothing about this to her. When the driver pulled in, Mia looked out the window and then looked at him. He looked back. Matching shoes day, Zara announced from the backseat, lifting both feet for inspection. Mia laughed, a real laugh, full-throated, surprised out of her, and it was the most wonderful sound in the city. They sat by the river for an hour. Zara collected flat stones and explained her system for choosing them to anyone who would listen. A duck appeared and was greeted as a personal friend. A couple on the path smiled as they passed. An old woman stopped and said, in Korean, "What a beautiful family," and kept walking before anyone had to respond. In the silence that followed, the three of them sat with those words. The river moved past them, wide and unhurried. Du Kaiyan-woo looked at the water. He thought about 11 years. He thought about choices and walls and the deliberate architecture of a man who decided what he could and could not afford to feel. He thought about 12 notes. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed the music box on the river bank between them. Zara looked at it. "Can I?" she asked. "Always," he said. She lifted the lid with both thumbs, very carefully, the way she did it every time, like it deserved the ceremony, like she understood that some things do. The melody rose into the river air, small and clear, sad and happy at the same time. Exactly as it was meant to be. There are stories that remind us what we already know, but have buried under the weight of being busy and careful and afraid. This was one of those stories. The inspiring story of a 5-year-old girl who ran toward the scariest-looking door she could find, because her mother told her that beyond it was someone worth finding. The sad story of 2 people who had loved each other and lost each other and been living 11 years in the same city's sky. The powerful story of what happens when a music box opens in the right room at the right time, and 12 notes undo 11 years of careful silence. The kindness that Du Kaiyan-woo showed was not the showy kind. It was not the billionaire writes a check kind. It was the harder, truer kind, the kindness of a person who sits down and stays, who plays the music box when asked, who learns that the walls he built to protect himself were also keeping out the things worth having. That is the life-changing moment that stories like this carry, not the grand gesture, but the small one, the rice cracker, the matching shoes, the chair pulled close to the bed, the decision made quietly and without announcement to stop going away. This is what humanity looks like when it remembers itself. This is the heart-touching story of a man who needed a 5-year-old girl to teach him that the heart does not actually close. It only pretends to. And all it takes, sometimes, is 12 notes and a pair of mismatched shoes, and something that has been pretending for a very long time will open again. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you of someone you love, or something you're afraid to reach for, or a choice you keep almost making, share it with someone who still believes in kindness. Because kindness is not a small thing. It is the thing. It is the trembling little girl who runs anyway. It is the music box played in a hospital room. It is the chair pulled close. It is choosing not to go away. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs it today. Like it, subscribe, and keep showing up, because there are more stories like this one waiting, and every single one of them is proof that even the coldest thing can thaw if the right song finds it. The world still has warmth in it. It always has. It just needs someone brave enough to run through the door.